Hello and welcome to a very special episode of First Geek 411. This week we are talking our top 7 cards from Kamigawa Neon Dynasty, and as always, it's not just me. There is my best man, Chris Nicolay. How are you doing?
Hello. I'm good. Ready to talk some magic. It's been a while.
It has been a while. So
Been-
thankfully.
Right? Like before it was
Yeah.
just like, oh, by the way, there's a special set. Here's a standard set.
Yeah.
And then here's 3 special sets in between for week by week.
And then joining us from a parallel podcasting universe, Jarret, the Infinity Bear, the most
Hi, guys.
magical Infinity Bro.
I would say I probably am safe claiming that title. There is 6 of us in all of our niche, and I feel like this one's mine for sure. So I did. I kicked open the door, and I came in guns a-blazing, and I said, "Put me on your podcast."
Yeah. I'm ready to talk magic cards.
Yeah.
Put me in, coach.
I need this.
So longtime people will recognize Jarret. You have been on a top list with us before, and then we were all together over on your channel doing
Yes.
Commander, the Great Commander Showdown. And so I almost said Commander Clash, which is
Yeah.
definitely not. That's a very
I
that's a
wish that
different
was my show.
program. Yeah. Um,
Wish we
so-
had that viewership.
right. But before we get into our top cards, listeners, as always, you can find us as One Geek 411 on our social media. You can join our Discord server, shoot an email to 1stgeek411 on gmail.com. Watch live right now, 6:45 Mountain Time on twitch.tv/1geek411. Be part of the post-show chats, and then find the videos over on our YouTube. You can also rate and subscribe wherever it is that you listen to podcasts, and check out the Redbubble store. Jarret, before we get into it, since it has been a while, what is your history with Magic? Favorite colors, favorite decks? When did you start playing? That kind of stuff.
So I originally started playing back in, I think, Mirrodin block as a little kid on the playground, and I got out of it for a while. And then, like every good Magic player, I just kind of come and go as
Right. You
as I
can't stop.
please. Right. And I keep saying, like, this is the year I think I'm done with Magic, and then they keep hooking me back in. Favorite colors. So this is an issue because I've been corrupted since the last time I was on this podcast. I'm still a filthy Dimir player, and I will stand by that till I die. But playing more Commander, I realized, like, my one-on-one strategy of making you hate me doesn't work well in Commander. And so I've been switching to more friendly colors like Naya and, just anything with white in it. And I've been building group hug decks. But at heart, I am a disgusting control player who thrives off of mill and ninjas and just degenerate strategies.
I feel like you make it sound like you've adopted my Hamza strategy
Yeah. Yep.
of just like politic your way into being almost dead, and then people will leave you alone, and then
Yeah.
you can surprise win the game.
When you
Guys,
have
I'm
a
not thrilled, I
pod,
promise.
Yeah.
when you have a pod, it's hard to play the rude colors because it's like
Yeah.
how easily could you turn that on me, and we're not going to allow that. So
People remember, man. Like, people
Yeah.
hold grudges.
I'm
You'll
one of
see that
them.
a lot too. Where, yeah, where it's like, why'd you attack him first? Like, he's clearly not the threat. And it's like, yeah, but 3 games ago he did this.
But I remember
Screw that guy, right?
Yeah. Oh man, good stuff. So we're chatting Kamigawa Neon Dynasty, which is like cyberpunk meets samurai and ninja, and there's a DJ and all this kind of crazy new art styles. And so kind of from an overview perspective, what'd y'all think of the set? We'll get into individual cards later on. But what's something that stood out to y'all as we got through spoilers?
Oh gosh. Okay, so for me, it's been a while since we've had a cool theme and also mechanics that feel balanced and powerful. And we were talking about this. I think actually I can't remember if I was talking with you guys about this off stream. But we've had variations of both, right? Like Ikoria was a really cool set thematically. AFR was the same way, but they weren't powerful by any means. I mean, you can take a look at any of the Enter the Dungeons mechanics and say like that set was crap. I'm sorry, it was like I like D&D. That set mechanically was horrible. And then on the flip side, you have stuff like Eldraine, which is just disgustingly overpowered. But the theme didn't really catch me, right? I'm not that much into European fantasy and storytelling and all this, and so Kamigawa did both for me, right? Like it's cool samurai, it's like neo, cyber futurism, like just and then also the mechanics are cool, right? Like we're gonna talk about it in a minute, but yeah, they knocked it out of the park on this one.
This set largely just reminds me of an Isekai anime.
You're just excited.
Yeah, it takes ideas and concepts we're familiar with, but like just takes them a step further, especially in terms of like mechanics. It's like there's nothing really new in a sense, but like there's lots of meshing that just work for this set, which we're obviously going to talk about later. But like, yeah, I'm just it's just like cool iterations of things we've seen in the past, maybe under a different name now. But they kind of just took everything from the last couple years and they're like, we're just going to throw it all together. Which makes this a really powerful set for Commander, because it's like,
for sure,
you just get so many synergies for any mechanic you're trying to work with.
We'll talk about this a little bit later on too, but once we got to see the actual cards, one of the things that I loved is this feels like the set where my top list could have been literally any rare or mythic and then like half the uncommons. And that always makes me excited. But like even before we saw the cards, for me, I love the themes. Like if people say this isn't what Magic is supposed to be, those are the themes that get me excited. Cause like one of the things that I love about Magic is how cool the art is. And so like getting to see that love and care given to cyberpunk is super cool and not something that we would necessarily have gotten. It's part of the why I liked Kaladesh a lot.
Yeah.
Is like you get really cool mechs and things like that aren't normal Magic, but they have really cool and really thought out art. And then let alone we get into this set with like the 8 different alt arts and that kind of stuff. But like, we'll talk about those as we go as well.
And a very awesome, like speaking of Kaladesh, a very awesome vehicle setup,
right?
Which is a lot of fun. Like we've seen odd ends of like the return of vehicles, just to like kind of keep it a thing, but this set really is just like, yeah, here's some vehicles, and there's nothing like crazy, but they are a lot of fun. And I think it's a great return for that as well.
There's not like at this point, I think the only color that doesn't have like strong vehicle themes is green, but we have a nice like Orzhov set. We have blue and white with the precon and some of the things that go in this, and then obviously Depala from Kaladesh. Like really, I've seen it done a few times where people take like commander decks and they build sort of modular with different commanders and different colors where they switch it out as they go. And vehicles now feels like it can slot into that perfectly. It was cool to see.
Yeah,
and it's all rats for some reason. I don't know why they did that. I
love. Okay, again, it's not on my list, but I love Biker Rat.
Yeah, absolutely. So good.
Foxes and rats as pilots. It's great.
Yeah. But with that, let's get into the mechanics for the set. We have like kind of 2 new mechanics, and then 3 returning ones. Jarret, which one do you want to start us off with?
Oh my gosh. Okay. I kind of like the idea of reconfigure, if I could take that one.
Go for it.
Just because it gives me a chance to talk about cards like, was it Lizard Sword or Lizard Blades?
Yes.
Okay, so the way this works is these cards are subtyped as equipment, even though they're creatures. And similarly to something like Bestow back in the old Theros block, they enter the battlefield as creatures, but they have an equipment cost. And this, as far as what we understand, this works well with everything that cheats, equipment costs, stuff like that. Um, and it is so buck wild because we know that this archetype is strong in draft. We've seen it with Bestow. We've seen it with some other stuff. And the fact that you can have, an artifact that sticks around after a board wipe that becomes a creature and vice versa. If you don't want it to die, you can turn it and slap it on something. And they're so well designed, right? Like each one feels unique and different, and they do sort of cool things that you wouldn't expect. And the art behind them is fantastic.
Chris just tossed up the
Yeah,
lizard
I did
blades
throw
on
them
our
up
stream.
since we are talking about it. Like, I'll just try to pull them up as we go. Like, since they aren't necessarily in our list, but this is a great example of that specific mechanic.
I think they did something interesting here where, like, artifacts and equipment have a fine line to walk, right? If you make an equipment too strong, it's going to be something like Embercleave, right? Goes in every deck that can allow it. It's not interesting when you use it. But these feel just the right power level where they're not draft chaff. You're not forcing it into a mechanic. And every deck could feasibly run these, but you do sort of have to build around them. And I think building it in that way where it's mechanically interesting, not too strong, not too weak, is really a fine line to walk. And they crushed it, man. I'm so excited for this.
I think that that's the biggest thing here is I would both be surprised and shocked if these saw a ton of play in constructed, but I also would be surprised and shocked if they didn't.
Yeah.
Like it's kind of like I could see it going either way versus you used the cleave as your example versus that, which is like such an obviously powerful card that's like, okay, well, this is going to be standard for the next like year and a half.
Gosh, that was wild. It was a rough standard.
Chris, what mechanic do you want to take?
So because it kind of goes with the mechanic, we'll go into modify. Which is really just a title mechanic for anything that's been modified. So this is anything that's been enchanted, equipped, countered, has counters on it. And so we just get a name for that and cards that care about other modified creatures. So this is a very cool mechanic for equipment matters for your enchantment decks, to where something's gonna look at it, or I get a cost reduction for every modified thing on the field. I'm trying to find a card that isn't on our list that kind of has that.
You can guess
wording.
who, but a certain someone really likes modified.
Yeah.
I liked it too. I had several cards in my top list, but I was like, oh, we're already talking about several of them, so boom, here we go. But it is, yeah, it's mostly just giving a name to something that already existed, and then making things care about it. And that's like, so it's not really a full-on new mechanic. It's just new keyword that things care about. And I like it.
So I wanted to ask you guys this because you guys are people who are invested in this. And I obviously, like, if I ask one of my friends at work or anyone else, they're not gonna know what the heck I'm talking about. But Ikoria was sort of an underpowered set that had some really cool ideas, right? Like I think it's fair to say wasn't strong by any means, especially in light of stuff like Eldraine. But one thing they did do is the interesting like keyword counters. And now that we have modified being something that's thrown into this, do you feel like those cards are now brought into the forefront as something that's useful, or do you think they still take backseat to anything else stronger?
Yeah, that's actually one of the things that we'll talk about a little later on when I get to some modified cards in my list. But yeah, I think that you saying Ikoria is not powerful. I think Ikoria is an extremely polarized set.
Yeah.
Where like you have your Sky Noodle, you have your Luris, and you have your like two of the ultimatums, and then you have the whole rest of the set. But I do think that this gives that rest of the set space to shine. Now, is it going to shine at like competitive tables? Like probably not. I don't necessarily see any of those like keyword counter things jumping up to be like
pretty sure this card's not on our list. So,
but I think something like the Ozolith
Yeah. Oh yeah.
would be this does give some new life to the idea of that card. And like I said, I don't think they're on our list, but like there are some cards, and we'll tie this in with ninjutsu, which I'll talk in a second about, where there are some cards that have ninjutsu that when they enter the battlefield, they get a keyword counter and then they
Right.
lose it. And so like there's a lot of fun stuff you can do with storing other counters on the Ozolith and stuff like that, trying to because obviously this doesn't work with ninjutsu but like then when you attack with that creature the next turn, they no longer have that ability, but you can now dump some other counters onto them and stuff like that. And so
Right.
I do think there's some potential there. And yeah, it'll just kind of be up to brewers to find what's the fun stuff. And so,
Right.
which I do
I
feel like is where
definitely
Ikoria shined.
agree,
like what's
though,
fun?
that it
Everything.
does give those cards a new life in a sense, because it allows you to focus on a specific aspect of your gameplay
Right.
that those things care about now. So I think especially for Commander, it definitely makes them more Commander viable. But you know, hopefully those.
I'm a strong fan of Slippery Bogbinder,
Mhm.
and anytime that card can get some love, I'm all about it. So yeah, modify is sweet.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm hyped. Um, for the next one, with returning the Kamigawa, we have the return of ninjas. Their first time in standard in quite a while. We had them in one of the Modern Horizons sets.
Yep.
But cards or creatures that have ninjutsu basically have an alternate casting cost where or an alternate cost, you don't cast them, but an alternate cost where if you are attacking with a creature that is unblocked, you can pay the ninjutsu cost, return that creature to your hand, and then put the ninja into play, tapped and attacking. And so a lot of them have abilities like when this deals damage, draw a card, or when this deals damage. Chris put one in that on the stream that has double strike, where like you very much have upside for getting in these surprise hits with these ninjas that you wouldn't necessarily have had, or where you maybe not been able to get in that big hit with a normal creature. And so, what do y'all
Yeah.
think about the return of ninjutsu?
Dude, I'm all in on this.
I'm
So
so excited
ahead.
because it's also this time around, like, it's hitting more colors, it's doing a lot more, it's a much bigger theme
yeah.
across the set, and I'm really liking it. And it's, you know, it's always it's another surprise mechanic, and who doesn't like that? Who doesn't want that in life?
Yeah, I happen to have a pet deck, one that I don't think I'll ever build in paper because at this point it's like $600. But I have a Sultai Ninjas list that I've been working on for the last like 2 years, basically since Ukima and Kazar were spoiled back in Ikoria, and I'm like, there's a bunch of great cards for blue and black, obviously, but green has no place in there other than to put in like the Toskies and ramp and all sorts of fun stuff. And then along comes Kamigawa Neon Dynasty, and they throw in green ninjas, and they're not weak, like they're actual good cards.
They're really
Um,
good. Like, some of my
yeah,
favorite ninjas are the green ones. I'm like, what? Now I
my
just got to figure out how to use them because
yeah, dude, they're strong. So we looked at I got a bunch of cards donated to me from Magic Kids. If you don't know what that is, it's a great organization. But I work with an after school club, and my high schoolers are like, hey, what's this magic thing you keep talking about? So they donated us a bunch of boxes, and one of them happened to be just chock full of Modern Horizon stuff. And so my kids built a ninja deck, and they're like, this is the coolest thing ever. So yeah, I can throw more ninjutsu cards.
yeah, I think, yeah, like, and I think the different, like, what's nice about them being in their different colors is that you all have an option to get something in. Like, each color kind of does it a different way.
Right.
Obviously, Demir always did it with unblockable things, but I think greens in this case is going to be like, oh, this is a death toucher. They're
Yeah.
probably not going to block them. Then they just do something else in. Get rid of, pull that death toucher back and have it available to cast. And then red's going to be just quick haste. It's like, oh, I'm just a little faster. I'm getting something bigger in now, and calling it good. And I really like those types of things. I don't know what White's actual thing is for
Yeah, I don't
for
think
getting
White
their
has
ninjutsu
ninjutsu,
creatures
but-
out, but there's nothing very specific there.
Isn't White's thing? We do everything all the other colors can do, but worse.
Right, right.
Isn't
Once
that
per
really
turn.
Right.
they have
Yeah.
flyers?
I
They
guess
can
you're gonna
have-
generate a lot of tokens, and it's like I'm gonna ninjutsu
Yeah.
the unblocked token because there was enough of them.
That's a good point. Just go wide with bad creatures. Yeah.
Go wide with bad creatures and get a good creature in on one of them.
Yeah. Yeah, there you go. I like that.
Jarret, what is our next mechanic?
Okay, so the next mechanic is channel, which is so buck wild. All right, let me just talk about this for a second. So the idea is you pay a cost, you discard the card from your hand, and it gives you some sort of effect, right?
Mhm.
And these can range from anything from cycling to blowing stuff up or turning things from graveyard. It is so diverse in what they put on these cards. I think I can't remember which one I saw first, but I was like, okay, so channel only does this one thing. And then they came out with the whole land cycle that has them, and I'm like,
Mhm.
it's just value stapled onto these cards. Like if you have a dead card in your hand, toss it away for whatever this effect is. The comparison I made and the one that I've seen going around quite a bit is these are like arguably fixed or better MDFCs, and like
Mhm.
that's maybe controversial, but like truthfully, they're strong effects and they're stapled on, and a lot of the lands now have like reduced cost based on legendary creatures. We're Magic players. We like big, flashy legendary creatures.
Yeah.
So like almost always these are going to cost less.
Mhm.
I like that idea when you have that sort of value of do I play this for the card that it is, or do I kick it away for its effect? Fantastic, absolutely well designed.
And decks
Yeah.
care about recursion. Like
Mhm.
you get this in your graveyard and you just start recurring it and reactivating that effect every time when you have legendary. And if you're getting other legendaries out, they're just getting cheaper in terms of those specific land ones, which we'll talk about a couple, I think one or two later in our top list. But like I just threw up Sunblade Samurai, which is channel to discard Sunblade Samurai, search your library for a basic plains card. This is great for white.
Yeah.
If you're getting a little landlocked, you don't want to be behind, at least in your land drops in white. So this is kind of a help, and you also gain 2 life. That's a very cheap effect.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think I was watching Jim Davis's stuff, and he comes at it from a more competitive mindset. But one of the points that he made was you should be thinking of all of the channel cards as their channel ability first, and then the rest of the card is a bonus if you don't need that other ability.
Yeah.
So, like again, going to the Sunblade Samurai, it's like you should be thinking of this as 2 mana, put a plains in my hand, gain 2 life. And then if you happen to put a 4/4 vigilance into play instead, that's upside. And there's like it's a very interesting way to think about it. And it's kind of funny because channel is an old mechanic that they're bringing back, and it still feels like fixed adventure from Throne of Eldraine, where like it's like Throne of Eldraine is like what if it was channel, but you could get both parts.
Yeah.
And then this is what if you had to choose unless you can reanimate. And so, but yeah, Chris, do you want to do our next one?
What is it?
I would if I knew.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, sure. I mean, like, and granted, like, so talking about this is about the only time we're going to, because none of these cards are on our list. And I'm not going to put any up because they flip. But yeah, so now we're getting these enchantment sagas and even like some shrines do this, which is great. But we're getting these modal flips. So like sagas that final effect is they flip into a creature of some sort with another effect, which is kind of cool. Nothing really grabbed my attention in this. It's just again for commander. This is nice because it's a lot of value. Because normally sagas you get that last powerful effect goes to the graveyard. In this case, you're getting 2 more mediocre effects and then a creature onto the field. So it's just good value for commander decks, especially probably on that budget side. I think these are going to be great. Obviously with Kamigawa we get the return of shrines, so we saw 5 new shrines. Just 5? Yep. 6.
5 in the main set. There's a commander.
Yeah, that's right.
Like set booster like shrine.
Yeah,
card.
and then the shrines.
So weird.
There's a few shrines that flip. Yeah, they flip into creatures as well, right?
No, they are creatures.
They are creatures. Okay, so sorry. I think that's the weirdest thing about this set is that we have artifact creature equipments
Yep.
and
Trying-
enchantment
and legendary enchantment creature shrines.
Yes.
Yeah.
Where shrine is not a creature type.
Right.
Yeah.
And so yeah,
so it's
one of
it's
the-
out there. Everything's been animated in this set essentially.
yeah.
Everything's
which I
alive.
love. I've said this before. Like one of the things that really bothers me is that because of Magic history, we've had artifact creatures for so long. But then when we went to Theros, they were like, we need to come up with a reason to have enchantment creatures. It's like, do
Right.
you? Like, just have enchantment creatures. And I feel like this set is them finally embracing, like, you know what? We can just have creatures that are enchantments. Like they're magically like enhanced or whatever. And like I feel like it's them finally embracing that.
Yeah, I feel like it wasn't like a deep dive to find a reason to do it. Like there's so much lore and like past things like where essentially like say you I mean like where the belief of a tattoo that can come alive. That's essentially exactly an enchantment creature,
Yeah.
you know, that
Right.
it comes off, you know, it can be attached to you, imbuing you with power, or it can operate on its own. And I think those are, you could always point to cool, crazy things from cultural lore that are just cool, and which I think Wizards has been doing a great job, especially like just looking at this set alone. We get so much flavor and just fun for things like that.
And then I didn't mention this other mechanic, and I'm going to just tease it here. But a certain someone has been completed, and may have not the best thing happen to them. And so we'll come back to that a little bit later on in the show. But let's get into our top 7 cards. So the idea here for anyone who is new is that we are going to each be bringing 7 different cards to talk about. We're going to share why we like them, chat about them like we've been doing this whole time. We're going to rotate through. We do come at this from a more commander, casual, fun focused. And so we're not going to necessarily be trying to tell you which ones are going to be break, modern, or whatever like that. If some happen to be good, they happen to be good. But these are the ones that we are excited about for one reason or another. And so it doesn't necessarily have to be anything super specific. We had one where Chris picked a vanilla 5/5 because it was a cool elf riding a bear. And so, you know, like there
also
are no
it was
rules.
a really good vanilla elf. Not
Yeah.
gonna lie.
So-
It was a good vanilla card.
But yeah, with that, we're going to jump in. Jarret, why don't you bring us your first card?
How does this go? Do you guys start with number 1 or number 7?
Whatever
heart-
you are feeling.
Yeah.
Okay.
Let your heart be your guiding key.
Yeah.
Because
We're
sometimes I'm
going
gonna pick. I might pick my card based on the card you pick to start with as a
I like
result.
that.
Because
Okay.
sometimes we get cool segues. Sometimes they're very forced.
Right. Okay, so I'm going to talk about one of my favorite cards of all time ever. This is Mech Titan Core. I am a filthy Voltron player now, and I don't know how it happened. No, actually, I do know how it happened. Somebody talked me into playing Palladium Wars on stream,
Right.
and I am now just like like I try so hard to make Voltron work. Mech Titan Core is actual Voltron. So if you guys don't know, if you're not big Magic fans and you're just here because you like our pretty faces, Voltron Commander is normally you have one creature and you slap a bunch of stuff on them, make them big and strong, and hit people with them, right? Like that's the fundamentals of Voltron. Voltron, the TV show, is 4 powerful lions who are defenders of the universe who form together to make a mech. You see this in Power Rangers. You see this in all sorts of media like this. Mech Titan Core is that in a Magic card. It is a 2 mana, 2 generic mana artifact vehicle. It has a crew cost of 2, which means you need 2 power to crew it. It is a 2/4. And here comes the interesting part. This is the whole icing on the cake. You pay
It's
5
bananas ability.
It's so buck wild. Okay, so you pay 5 mana generic, exile Mech Titan Core and 4 other artifact creatures and/or vehicles you control. Create Mech Titan. This is a legendary token. It is a 10/10 construct artifact creature with flying, vigilance, trample, lifelink, and haste, and it's all colors. When that token leaves the battlefield, all cards exiled by it return to the battlefield under its owner's control. So if you have 4 mirrors, 4 generic Thopters, or whatever you want, you pay 5 mana in this, you assemble Voltron and go smashing in with the Megazord. It is so unbelievably cool.
I'm so hyped.
A 10-10 with
a 10-10 with
flying,
keyword
vigilance,
soup.
trample, lifelink, and haste.
Yeah, dude.
Yeah.
It's so fun.
So it's not going to tap. It's in the air, so it has evasion. It's going to trample over anything that's not blocked. You're going to gain 10. I mean,
I saw this card and like the guitar riff from Mighty Morphin Power Rangers just played on repeat for a week in my brain. I could not escape it.
now you just got to put your lizard blades on it.
Yeah. Love that. I am all about the lizard blades.
Yeah, this is spicy. I really like it. One of my favorite planeswalkers is the War of the Spark Saheeli. That when you cast a non-creature spell, you get a servo.
Yep.
And I just love it with this of like we're playing this like blue red like Bernie spells deck. We're making these servos, and then we just get the 7 mana, slam this, and sack some servos at the same time. And
you just pull out the dragon fruit and go wild. Yeah. I'm
so excited. This is one of the things that like playing Commander for several years now has really gotten me is I can't wait to lose to fun cards. Yeah. And this is that's kind of where I'm at with this. I'm like, I cannot wait for someone to cheese me out with this.
Yeah,
my favorite thing about this is also like it's strong. It's great, but it's not, you can deal with it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Too.
It's also not insanely difficult to do the fun part.
Yeah.
Like Caldra. Like where you have to get these 3 different equipment, get them all on the battlefield. Like this thing isn't difficult to have fun with. And it's like, I appreciate that in a card.
And it's great in this set because pretty much all the artifacts are creatures in this set for the most part.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they do a good job. And I think this one was built for this set, but also like it was made truly for all of us nerds who grew up on those, you know, amazing TV shows.
Going full like official Voltron here.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which is super nice. And also like this alt art that I have up, I love this art.
Oh my, it's so good.
Again, it's so shameless, and that's what I love about it.
They do not care. This is okay. Well, if you're interested in Magic and you love Easter eggs, this is the set for you. Yeah. Like we'll talk about more later. There are so many Easter eggs in this.
I feel like it's like half of your list, Jarret, is the Easter egg cards.
Yeah. Yep, absolutely.
Chris, what is your first card?
Speaking of legendary artifacts.
Nice.
Kind of, I guess. I don't know. Legendary and being, I don't know. It's not technically a legendary artifact. But I picked Mirror Box for one of mine. Mirror Box is just an artifact. It costs 3, but the legend rule doesn't apply. Okay. We should say there's another artifact. Mirror something. Costs 5, and only the legend rule doesn't apply. This has some other stuff going on with it. Each legendary creature you control gets +1/+1. Each non-token creature you control gets +1/+1 for each other creature you control with the same name as that creature. So, copy deck dot legendary.
Any of the you can play more than 4 of these is really good.
Right. We have this is crazy. So like now you can with this out you can target your legendary creatures that are now pumping each other. An additional, so they automatically get +1/+1 from Mirror Box, and then they each get +1/+1 because there's another card with their name on the field. So this goes great with Helm of the Host.
Yep.
Granted, Helm of the Host ready is overriding the legendary rule, so it's worth equipping. But now you get this out on top of that, or you're gonna start casting your mimics and copies, targeting your legendary creatures, and things just get fun with this, I think, especially in Commander. Now you get a bajillion of your Commander out, and you're just like, they're big.
It sure would be a shame if there was a partner whose literal purpose was to clone another partner.
Yeah.
What?
I look at so there's a deck that's been scratching and rattling around in my brain for arguably too long, which is a Riku like copy deck, but the entire goal of this deck is to get as many copies of Seven Dwarfs on the battlefield as a time. And this is so good in that. It's so shameless and it's the dumbest deck because in Commander, like, sure, 7 cards is a lot, but not really. But yeah, gosh, I'm gonna build that deck and I'm gonna hate myself for doing it, and it's your fault, Chris.
But I'm gonna love you for doing it regardless.
Yeah,
So I mean,
absolutely.
like whether it's good or and sometimes you're like
It's
people are
gonna
gonna be like, okay, and they're gonna underestimate you because you're gonna explain the premise and they're gonna be like,
right.
we'll see how often you do that, and then you do it once. That's all you need for a deck to be awesome is to manage to pull off what you built it to do once. And it's usually going to be in the first few times you play it, because they're going to be like, okay, first time you're going to be like dirtling and like nothing's happening, and they're next time you play it against people are like, he's not a threat. And they're not going to worry. And then, by the way, I just drew everything I needed. Smack. But yeah.
So,
or you can get a lot of your Voltron Titan tokens out.
Absolutely.
Oh my
absolutely.
Get all of them.
Just all of them. I have 5 Voltrons out.
Oh no. Is this another slots and Brutacladry?
I mean, arguably everything slots in Brutaclad.
Yeah.
And I do want to say though, like, while Brutaclad is no more, this is very good with tokens in general because tokens all have the same name.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So all of your
beast non-token.
It is non-token. Just kidding. This is awful with tokens. Good job, Chris. You passed the test.
We're proud of you.
But yeah, this has a lot of spice there. Like, and yeah, it's one of those cards again. I hope is good. Like,
it's cheap enough that I think it's good. Like 3 cost artifact is always like with 3 separate things that it's trying to do is nice.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So keeping the artifact train rolling, mine is legendary, and that is the reality chip. So this is one of the major cards from the set, and it is a legendary artifact creature equipment jellyfish for 1 and a blue. It says you may look at the top card of your deck at any of your library at any time. And as long as the reality chip is attached to a creature, you may play lands and cast spells from the top of your library. Then you can reconfigure for 2 and a blue. So if this is reconfigured, it's basically Future Sight. The top of your deck becomes an 8th card in your hand. You do have to get it attached to something, but like, I like this. This kind of is the same thing that you were just talking about, Chris, where it's cheap to play and 3 mana to reconfigure isn't crazy. Like, it's something that you could very easily do, like, and then go off the next turn, or do this as part of your turn late game, something like that. We should say
there's no stipulation to that piece, like to its effect.
Mm-hmm.
So it's more than just an 8th card in your hand. It's the 8th, 9th, 10th, because the cards you were playing from the top, you can continue playing.
Right.
Because
as long as you don't hit a patch of lands,
so you can play. Until you hit that second land that you can't play, you keep going.
This is one of the few times that I've seen people argue for the shock lands. What are the tap lands? You pay 1 and you search for your library. This is one of the few times that I've seen somebody argue for those in a mono-colored deck, mono blue, because it gives you a reshuffle effect and you can just go buck wild. Like, say you get, you're just flowing out of mana, you have too many lands on top of your deck, reshuffle. I think this is really strong. And this sort of effect, we saw it with one of the druids from, I think it was from Crimson Vow, or maybe the set right before that, where you could play creatures and under certain conditions, lands from the top of your deck, and like, this has always been a powerful effect, and stapling it onto a jellyfish artifact creature is so buck wild. I love it. I'm here for this stuff.
Yeah. And the great thing about this
jellyfish armor.
Yes. The great thing is that if you're reconfigured, so if this becomes an equipment, and they destroy the creature, you still get the equipment. Like it falls off and becomes a creature again. So you're not going to necessarily have to deal with having to recast this a bunch as long as it's on something when that board wipe comes. And so like that's a fun piece of resilience compared to the I can't remember the one from Crimson Vow that you're talking about, but like compared to like your Oracle of Moldias or something like that let you play lands off the top or cast, like those are always so fragile, kind of intentionally. But this has that advantage of like you can just slide it over and have it become an artifact. I mean at sorcery speed, but like there is that
boggle, and then it's so hard to remove.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Get it on those hexproofers.
All right. My next one is sort of a degenerate blue card. It's blue-black. It's Dimir. It's right up my alley. It is Satoru Umezawa. I am a sucker for this whole family. Back with Toshiro in the original Kamigawa block, and then Tetsuku, who showed up in Dominaria. These cards are always a hit for me. Like, they've never designed a bad card in this family. So let me read them. You'll see what I mean in a second. So it is 1 blue-black Dimir colors for a legendary creature, human ninja. He's a 2/4. And it says this. Whenever you activate a ninjutsu ability, look at the top 3 cards of your library. Put one of them into your hand and the rest on the bottom of your library in any order. This ability only triggers once each turn. So cool, you have some filtering. You can look through the top 3. This is where it gets buck wild. Each creature card in your hand has ninjutsu for 2 and Dimir. So you have a tiny little unblockable creature, maybe a Brian-born Cutthroat or whatever they're called. And you go and slam in with this thing. They can't block it. And all of a sudden, for 4 mana, you throw in, I don't know, a Blightsteel Colossus. Or Jin-Gataxias, or you know what I mean? Like, this turns every creature in your hand into a ninjutsu card. And that effect is so degenerate and disgusting, and I'm here for it. This is what I'm talking about when I say, that whole, like, inside you there's 2 wolves. This is my filthy Dimir wolf, and it's about to eat everybody alive.
What's so gross about this is, like, you don't even have to build a ninjutsu deck if this is your commander.
Absolutely not, yeah.
That's like, everything's just unblockable creatures and big threats.
And big, disgusting threats.
Yeah. This is the type of blue deck that you're gonna get someone once, then the North is going to remember.
Absolutely.
Like you are the threat at the table. If you're playing like this, there's no convincing people you're playing the casual version of this deck. Like everyone's gonna assume you're gonna Blightsteel them.
Absolutely. The crazy thing too, I don't know which art you put up if it's the one I linked.
Yeah, and this art's gorgeous.
Oh, it's so good. So my dad years ago bought the original, Sony PlayStation, and his favorite game to play was Metal Gear Solid. Like consistently. Yeah, and my dad was so like in on this that he would buy the magazines and all the collectibles. And so when I saw this art, I was like, this feels so Metal Gear, and I cannot shake it. And then I found out this artist is the Metal Gear Solid
Metal Gear artist.
Yeah. And I'm like, oh my gosh, it comes full circle. Yeah. This is the best card ever printed. This is my favorite Magic card. I will argue this to the ends of the earth. This and Toski are right up there.
Buy a print of this art.
Absolutely. Yeah. I'm getting this tattooed on my face.
This is face tat worthy is the thing. It's just,
absolutely.
Just don't go to Japan and try to go to the hot springs if you do that. That would be they bad. Will literally think you are actually Yakuza.
I think people in the States would give me a funny look too if I had a Magic card tattooed on my forehead, but we'll see.
Only one way to find out.
Guess we gotta do it now.
And I guess with that, we'll go ahead and jump into ninjas. So I did have to pick one of these green ninjas, and I did pick Spring Leaf Avenger, which is a rare in the set. Costs 3 and 2 green. It is an insect ninja. Just kind of like everything's a ninja in this world, apparently, too.
Yeah.
It's like
ninjas and samurai. That's all it is.
Everything will kill you.
Yeah. But it's 3 and 2 green for a 6/5. Even worse, it ninjutsus for 3 and a green. So
Yeah.
4 mana
Heck
for
yeah.
a 6/5 onto the battlefield, and when it deals combat damage to a player, return target permanent card from your graveyard to your hand. So you get some great. So 3 green for a 6/5 to the face that then also recurs you a card from your graveyard.
Mm-hmm. Like any of your channel cards.
Yeah.
Like what?
Of which there's a lot.
Right.
Yeah. And arguably, I would say, which we'll be probably talking about, those lands are crazy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they're buck
Oh, yeah.
wild.
Yeah, I think this is something that's really interesting for this card specifically is that even without ninjutsu, this is just a good card.
Right.
Oh, absolutely.
Like it's not like, I mean, you give this trample or something, it needs another way to get through without ninjutsu, but like it's one of those cards that like a 6/5 for 5
It's good.
with upside
hard
is
to
a good
argue
place to
against
be to
that.
begin with.
Yeah, Richard Garfield is out there somewhere just like losing his mind over
Right.
how much power creep Magic has.
Yeah.
This is crazy too. So I have a bet with some people on Twitter. Is this a Kung Fu Panda reference, or do we think this is like a Mantis from Marvel reference? Because they have so many Easter eggs that this feels like it has to be something.
I don't know. I feel like there's a lot in this set that like I'm gonna just assume I don't get it.
Yeah, fair enough.
Like there's a lot of there's a lot of references that I'm sure are there, and
Yeah.
I'm just and that's even like if you look back at old school Kamigawa as well, where it's
Yeah.
like it's very rooted in like actual Japanese mythology as opposed to American pop culture Japanese mythology.
Right.
And there's a whole lot of like I don't know what any of this is. What is this weird spirit blob? And it's this like this other part of their culture that just like isn't prominently known. And so that's kind of where I'm at with like a lot of this. It's like I just assume it's not. It's like over my head.
Yeah, kind of. Yeah, I'm not even sure what they might be referencing with this specific card, but I like it.
Mm-hmm. So for me, we're going to keep the theme of getting things out of the graveyard with Spirit Sister's Call, which is an enchantment for 3 white black. At the beginning of your instep, choose target permanent card in your graveyard. You may sacrifice a permanent that shares a card type with the chosen card. If you do, return the chosen card from your graveyard to the battlefield and it gains. If this permanent would leave the battlefield, exile it instead of putting it anywhere else. So I'm a sucker for any way of recurring things from the graveyard. Like that's really one of my go-to themes is graveyard shenanigans and into the battlefield effects. And this does both of them extremely well.
Absolutely.
And I really like the ability on this to sacrifice tokens to get other things out of the graveyard. And just that ability to throw out these like weaker cards that you're just generating for value and then again turn them into the actual cards that you're playing in your deck. And while it's definitely abusable, I like that there is still a drawback to that. Like if your thing would leave the battlefield, it gets exiled instead. And so like it's this fun like creaturey flashback stapled onto this enchantment that thankfully triggers at your instep, so it's not like you have to make it a full turn cycle before you get this effect. But
that's always rough when it's like an upkeep and you're like, at least give it flash so I can have it for my first turn.
Right. And then I think this being instep versus upkeep is what makes this card playable. Like I'm not a huge fan of like obviously in Commander, play whatever cards you like. But like from like a general perspective, I think if this is upkeep and you have to survive with this on the board when
That's
everyone
scary.
can see your
Yeah.
graveyard, like the odds of you getting what you want is very slim. But with this being at your instep, you should at least get one thing that's really good out of this. So
Yeah, so speaking of cards you want to get back from the graveyard, see, I'm getting good at these transitions.
We're great.
gotta believe.
Yeah, Boseiju Who Endures is a legendary land. It's tapped to add green. Noticeably comes into play on tapped, which is really nice. And then it has that chef's kiss perfect channel ability. So it says, discard this card for 1 and a green. Boseiju who endures, destroy target artifact, enchantment, non-basic land, and opponent controls. That player may search their library for a land card with basic land type. It doesn't say search for a basic land, it says basic land type. Put it onto the battlefield, then shuffle. This ability costs one less to activate for each legendary creature you control. So, this is removal stapled onto a legendary land, but also in the instance that you have to nuke something of your own, you can grab a triome or a dual land as long as it has the basic land type on it. The flexibility on something like this is so crazy for 1 green mana, because most of the time if you're going to play this in Commander or almost anything else, you're going to have a legendary creature on the battlefield that's going to reduce this by 1. I have the AC precon sort of lands matter, right? And
Good precon.
I feel so bad making that a landfall deck because it's accidentally too strong, right? Like it's hard to make that not a strong deck. But when I can make it like, big stuff tribal, Leviathan tribal, Kraken tribal, and then still have landfall synergies in there with stuff like this and have the flexibility to say, do I want to land? Do I want to do this other thing? Anytime I'm given a choice as a Magic player, that's important to me. So yeah, this card rocks.
I think this is also a really important card for green because we don't have a lot of just targeted general destruction. So we have now the option. We have artifact, enchantment, and non-basic land destruction on a single card for cheap.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah, and I like that while you can like hit that extremely powerful non-basic land or something that your opponents have, they do get to tutor something else up. So at least you're not like hosing someone out of the game. But this is also the type of play that if you're playing Commander, you need to politic your use of this card. And it's I can save the table, but you have to do something for me. And this is that prime thing of whatever it is that they're about to combo off with. I mean, as long as it's not a creature, I can do something about it. And I think this is really good. And I also really like that you can actually, if someone's out of the game, you can actually ramp them if they can get something in play and help to get them back in the game. Obviously doesn't come up much, but I like that. I like that the option's there. Kind of like Fertilid. You can target any player.
I love that.
So good. And I would say this might be arguably one of the best of these legendary lands.
Yeah, this one and the blue one I think I like the most, but Boseiju is just, it's so strong.
Yeah, especially because this one goes in a lot of things. It doesn't really necessarily care as much about that legendary creature rule it has on it, because it costs 1 less.
Right.
Already. So like as long as you have your commander or any legendary creature out, it only cares about 1 being there. Whereas the other ones there's a couple that actually scale with more legendaries, but Oh, I'm up. I don't even know what my next one is then.
I believe in you, Chris.
I don't even remember which cards are mine.
The ones in the Chris section.
Yeah, but they're not sorted by tabs.
What does your heart tell you?
Yeah, let your heart decide.
Yeah. While you do that,
there we go. We'll go on to the Thundering Raiju. This is a creature spirit, costs 2 and 2 red for a 3/3 haster, which is nice. Very fast 3/3. Whenever Thundering Raiju attacks, put a 1/1 counter on target creature you control. Then Thundering Raiju deals X damage to each opponent, where X is the number of modified creatures you control other than Thundering Raiju. Back to that modified keyword. Anything that's been modified, equipped, enchanted, has a counter on it. Just doing additional X damage.
I want to give this guy infect so bad. Like it's a problem. I really want to give this thing infect.
Right? Which is just a modification.
Yeah.
If you do it right. Oh man. and it's to each opponent. Again, like that's really what makes this card so great,
Mhm.
is that you get it, and it's whenever this creature attacks. Um,
Yeah.
so it's a recurring effect. It's something, yeah, for sure. If this is like your first modified creature or something, or you're gonna modify a creature with him, so you're guaranteeing one when he gets in and for haste for 3/3 or whatever. It's great.
Mhm.
I like this in the 99 of something like a Grom Gully deck, where you constantly have that modification from the +1/+1 counters, and you also sort of go wide with it. Um, the sky's really the limits with that. But I just want to put infect on it. Anytime I see the word damage
Each.
to each, yeah, I'm like, I gotta put infect. I have to. I can't stop myself.
Yeah, very good in two-headed giant.
Absolutely.
Um, I'll say this is one of the goes great in Marchesa the Black Rose
Yeah.
cards from this set. And so yeah, this is sweet. I love the haste on it. And I like that the trigger isn't based off of power, it's based off of the number of modified creatures.
Yep.
Mm.
And so I think that that's pretty fun, that it does encourage you to spread out, where you put that like that counter compared to other styles where you're just trying to go super big. And so
Yeah, and I mostly saw this as something that goes in Halar for me specifically,
mhm.
because Halar does have plenty of equipment in him. He has a lot of things that are going to put counters out, and then the kickers mostly become a sub theme because they cost too much usually. And I just thought this would be a fun way to get additional things out. It's also an extra body and creature with haste that I can get out there and do stuff with. But yeah, he just also look at it. Look at that face. It's so
Mhm.
cute. No.
He's so happy in the lotus flower thing that it's got going on there.
Yeah.
So we're gonna keep it on mono red for my next card, which is the March of Reckless Joy. So shout out to any time we can get a red card where the emotion is not fury or rage or whatever. Always happy when we can see joy and excitement, which obviously don't show up too much in a game about fighting. But March of Reckless Joy is an instant for X and a red. This is part of a cycle where, as an additional cost to cast this spell, you can exile any number of red cards from your hand. This spell costs 2 less to cast for each card exiled this way. And then you exile the top X cards of your library. You may play up to two of those cards until end of your next turn. So the way that I think about this is it's very similar to Valakut Awakening, which is one of the modal double face cards from Zendikar.
That's a strong card.
Where for that one, you dump cards from your hand and then draw back up. For this one, since it's an instant, like I kind of think if you're paying mana into this card, besides the one red, you're doing it wrong. Like this is I have 2 red cards in my hand that aren't going to help me. I'm going to exile the 4 cards off the top of my library and play 2 of them on my next turn. Like,
or even this turn.
Yeah, or even this turn. Yeah,
until the end of your next turn.
Right.
So even if you whiff and get lands, that you're at least getting 2 lands out of that, because it does say play, which is super nice.
Right. And so I just think that that's like the way to go with this card is, and like I said, I like X spells where the goal isn't how big of an X can you make. Like obviously the more cards you get to see here, the more options you get for those two. But at the same time, like this feels good for like, again, 1 red mana, exile 2 red cards from your hand, get 4 cards like to look at. Like I think that's solid. And I really like that spot for it to be. Again, compared to most typical X spells where it's what's the biggest number I can do, that's what I want.
I feel like Impulse Draw in general is getting better and better.
Mm-hmm.
And like any red deck would be happy to have this. Add into the fact that they printed, I don't know how many like Exile Spell Matters and Impulse Draw Matters cards in the last 5 years. That something like the Rakdos Precon Commander
Prosper,
right? Like Prosper is going to go nuts with this. Yeah, man, like this is a strong effect. Red has struggled with card draw for a very long time. Impulse Draw has seemed to be the way to go, and this is just value town.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's a part of me that almost says red has so much value anymore. Because
people are still making the argument argument that white is the weakest, and I'm fully on that train. I understand that. I think eventually it'll get strong. But I talked about this on TikTok a while ago. Red is a lot stronger than people seem to think it is. I still hear it all the time that like red is suffering commander, they can't do, and like yeah, when you compare it to the fact that green gets every toolbox and then some, sure, right? But like red is a lot stronger than it used to be, and I think it's arguably higher up than people rank it. While we're on red and card draw, my next card is Reinforced Ronin, and I'm gonna stop at the art because that's all you need to be able to play this card. Like, I don't care what's stapled underneath that. If you look at this art and you don't go, I need that in a deck, you're doing something wrong, and you don't belong at my match.
Actually, all the arts on these on the
they're
Reinforced,
so good
because like I feel like he's one of the ones that it's an uncommon. It has like 3 prints in this set.
Yeah, absolutely. They went wild with this, but I will read the card since we're here anyways. It is 1 red for a 2/2 artifact creature human samurai. It has haste, and at the beginning of your end step, return Reinforced Ronin to its owner's hand. So it attacks, arguably that turn when the shields are down. It has the haste to swing in, and then immediately bounces itself back to your hand, which allows you to do the second ability, which is Channel. Again, you discard this. It is 1 in a blue to discard Reinforced Ronin and draw a card. So this is essentially cycling for 2. I love this. Anytime I see something with, yeah, exactly. So like this is strong not just as an aggressive card that hits the ground as a 2/2 slams in, but like it enables enter the battlefield, exit the battlefield effects, and then you have cycling stapled onto this, and it enables itself to cycle by bouncing back to your hand. And
it's really good with ninjutsu, like as a haste. Like your opponent's probably gonna know about it by the time you're like ninjutsuing this in, but to what we were talking about earlier, it helps you go wide on that turn, and something's going to survive. And this gives you just one more body to push through.
And you look at this and you say, like, you know, how good is a 2/2 with haste? And, you know, it is bouncing it back to your hand, but that's almost a form of protection, right? Because it's never going to be touched by anything sorcery speed. It's always going to protect itself by bouncing back to your hand. I love this card. For an uncommon, it's so powerful.
Yeah, I mean, it's 2/2 for 1 mana.
Yeah.
I do have one major gripe about this card. And it has nothing to do with the playability of the card. But it is, why does this card not have dash?
Yeah.
And like, I know WotC has said they don't like to put keywords from other sets on. It just adds another word. But you're telling me you couldn't fit the word dash for 1 in a red?
Yeah.
And taken off the whole rest of that text?
Yeah.
Like, and then like even have this have no, like maybe in this realm it has to be bumped up to a rare or whatever, but have it like this card would have been so sweet if it had no mana cost. You could not cast it normally, and it just had a dash.
I would love
like that would be so cool. And yeah, and then to what we were talking about earlier, and this is like a more minor beef, but I just want to reiterate that we've had years of artifact creatures. What is artifact about this guy? He has a robot arm.
Yeah.
That is super cool, but we can't get enchantment creatures unless we have a thematic reason for it.
Right.
Like, I know we talked about that earlier on. I just want to reiterate, I am bothered by that.
Also,
this card is sweet.
And just in general, the art has no business being this good on an uncommon.
It's so good.
But then again, at the same time, all the art in this set is just spot on.
They went buck wild with the art for this. Like, there's not a single card right now that feels like a miss.
Yeah, I feel like we've been saying that a lot with our most recent reviews ever since they got into a lot of cards have extra arts, like thinking back to like Mystical Archive, even Battle for Zendikar, when we were starting to get those ultimate art treatments. Like, I feel like every set they've been getting better and better.
Yeah.
And I think that's like, again, this set, there's something for everyone art wise.
Yep. It's hard because I want them all, and I don't make that much money. But we will figure out. But for my next card, speaking of attacking, maybe, where's he at? There is here we go. My first legendary creature, Ishin, 2 heavens as 1. This is definitely a commander I'm thinking about building. he costs 3 for, and he's a 3/4, but he does cost 1 red, 1 white, 1 black. So he's a 3-color commander, human samurai for a 3/4. But if a creature attacking would cause a triggered ability or permanent you control to trigger, that ability triggers an additional time, doubling attack triggers.
Mm-hmm.
Which we just had an attack trigger under Thundering Raiju. So now you get 2 modified creatures straight to the face to each opponent.
Yep. And you deal damage twice.
Yes.
Yeah, this card is sweet. We just had a similar effect in the AFR commander decks that triggered only when you attacked. And I think it's really sweet that this one triggers when anyone attacks, as long as you control the permanent that the ability is on. And so there's a lot of fun of like, whenever an opponent attacks with a one or more creatures, you may give one of those creatures double strike or something like that. That's might not be the exact, but like just like shenanigans like that.
Mm-hmm.
That like there's a lot of politics you can have with a card like this, which I think is really fun. This is, if I didn't already have a Mardu deck, this is probably the one that I would be making.
Right. And also it will double the triggers for creatures like things that say if a creature attacks you. Anything like that. Yeah. I think this has a lot of potential. It's also a very cheap Mardu commander, which is super nice. Just straight up 3 cost. Not too, it's like nothing crazy, but a 3/4 for 3 is still nice. And
if only you were in the haste color.
Yeah.
What? It's like maybe you haste out a Ronin.
Yeah. So I'm looking at this too from a standard perspective. So one of my favorite cards in standard right now that I feel like doesn't see as much play as I would like it to, and maybe it's not as strong as I value it as, but it's called Minion of the Mighty. It's a kobold, and the whole deal with this thing is if you attack with creatures total power 6 or greater, you can put a dragon card from your hand onto the battlefield attacking. So with this guy out and Minion of the Mighty, you swing in with 6 power across the board. Easy to do when you have a 3/3. Suddenly you have 2 giant dragons coming into the battlefield and attacking. And this is a set that also has a bunch of powerful dragons. Just a very cool card in every format. So I think it's going to be strong in like modern and legacy. No, but it is fun everywhere across the board.
Yeah. Something I'm definitely putting Ilharg in, you know, getting those single turn big creatures for free. Super nice. If you have the other mechanics to keep them on the field after that, even better. Things like that. It's a lot of fun.
Very strong. Very cool.
Speaking of legendary creatures, my first legendary is Gunji, the Midnight Sky for 3 black, legendary creature, Dragon Spirit, flying, menacing 5/5. Another one that's part of a cycle. We had similar dragons in the previous Kamigawa, and so they all have a dies trigger. And so when this one dies, choose 1. Each opponent discards 2 cards and loses 2 life, or put target non-dragon creature from a graveyard onto the battlefield under your control. You lose 2 life. So again, I'm a filthy graveyard player, and all I want to do is put this in Marine. And then it's like, oh, you're going to kill my stuff. Cool. Oh, everyone's now 2 cards shorter. Or, the thing that you just destroyed on the other person's side, it's mine now. Like, both of these modes are so cool. And then, like, you know what? If they don't kill your cool dragon, you got a flying, menacing 5/5.
It's also nice for board wipes.
Yeah. Yeah,
board
great
wipes,
protection.
It's like, oh, well, I recover at least a little bit with the most powerful thing from this that went to the graveyard. It's like, okay.
Yeah, this is sweet. If you have a way to double up death triggers too with something like what is the Yarok? No, is Yarok the one that takes him back from the graveyard?
Yarok is enters the battlefield.
Oh, that's right. Okay. If you have a ETB or a LTB leaves the battlefield.
Is it Teysa?
It might be Teysa. Then obviously you get to steal 2 things, and notably, right? Like, it doesn't say your graveyard; it says a graveyard.
A graveyard.
But also, you can get your big thing back if you were the threat.
Right.
Like if someone board wipes, it's like, well, I'm still the threat.
If you're playing Dragon deck, it is very hard to miss with this card. Like you're gonna get something big and fun and gross.
And it is Teysa Karlov from Ravnica Allegiance.
I would even consider running this as your commander, like a mono black commander. Not gonna lie.
Mm-hmm.
That's cool. I like it. Okay. My legendary creature on my list is Lightpaw's Emperor's Voice. It is 1 and a white for a legendary creature, Fox Advisor. It is a bear, a 2/2. It says this: whenever an aura enters the battlefield under your control, if you cast it, you may search your library for an aura card with mana value less than or equal to that aura and with a different name than each aura you control. Put that card onto the battlefield attached to Lightpaw's Emperor's Voice, then shuffle. It's a lot of text, but it's
that's a lot of writers.
Yeah. If you take an aura and you cast it, you're allowed to bring in a different aura of the same or less value, as long as it doesn't match anything else, and put it on Lightpaws. I have a combination Voltron and Enchantress deck that I'm running. It's a Palladium Moras, is what I call it. And I love slapping auras. What's that?
I made my stance on puns well known.
Yeah. And that's arguably my favorite pun. Palladium
It's like, how else do you name your commander decks without being puns?
Yeah, it's gotta be like, it's gotta be either a pun or something really, really stupid that has nothing to do with anything. So I like the idea that I bring out an aura, I get my Enchantress triggers, and then I get a second aura, second set of Enchantress triggers, and whatever powerful effect is attached to either of these.
And then you also have a ton of modified things.
Exactly, yeah. It all comes full circle.
It all fits the theme.
All the Enchantress cards from this, all the enchantment cards, and then all of the like modified and equipment matters cards from this. It's so hard when sets like this come out because I look at my decks and I go, I don't have room for any of this, but you know I'm going to force them in there. Lightpaws is for sure going in that deck.
I like it. It's also very cost effective. Like, even thinking about like a budget commander deck.
Oh yeah.
This is a budget commander, like, or just like low cost. 2 costs for a 2/2 for your commander. Get him out, start getting those enchantments. And yeah, so you're double casting auras onto it, beginning turn 3 potentially. Getting 2, 3, so you're getting 6 for 3 mana. You're getting 6 mana worth of auras attached to Lightpaws.
And on top of it, I really value being able to flash in auras, and the fact that this tutors, I can flash in an aura of indestructibility or hexproof or whatever I need, and then pull a second effect. So if I got a board wipe coming my way, I can flash in something that gives indestructible or totem armor, and then slap the other one on Lightpaws. There you go. You just wipe the entire board. I'm sitting here with my 2 best creatures. Like, yeah, it's wild.
Could see play in historic. Like blue white auras is a real deck.
Oh, absolutely.
In historic. It's had other times where it's been better in the meta. But this could definitely see play as like a 1 or 2 of in that deck. Like obviously you're drawing a lot of cards with your core spirit dancers, your Sarams and stuff like that. So like there is some questions there, but like there's a good chance that you play this.
I'm looking at like a historic and alchemy deck with Killian Ink Duelist as sort of an Orzhov auras, because then you have removal on a stick that's cheaper in aura form, and really just like a strong effect. So yeah, that's where I'm sitting with this right now too.
To bring that Mardu legendary full circle, Cameron, is your next card going to be a red legendary creature? No, just kidding. Let's see what do we got? What do we got next? Sure. Let's go with a unnamed planeswalker.
Yeah.
The Wandering Emperor. Where's my picture? There we are. Is just a legendary planeswalker. No name, nothing. We don't know anything yet. Costs 2 and 2 white. Has flash, which is super nice. And also has a modifier as a result of it having flash, because normally flash on a planeswalker wouldn't make much sense.
Pretty bad, normally.
As long as the Wandering Emperor entered the battlefield this turn, you may activate her loyalty abilities anytime you could cast an instant. It does enter with 3. Um, so essentially, back to back, you're going to be pumping up pretty much straight to 5 if you cast end of opponent's turn, entering yours. But it has a +1. Put a 1/1 counter on up to one target creature. It gains first strike until end of turn. So flash in, modify a creature, block with first strike, super nice. -1, create a 2/2 white samurai creature token with vigilance. And -2, exile target tapped creature. I get and gain 2 life. So all around great planeswalker. Stabilizes you with modifications. And keywords can give you creatures if need to, using the -1. Otherwise, you have a -2 removal available to you, which is always nice.
Yeah. While the effects are different, this really reminds me of Archangel Avacyn from Shadows over Innistrad, where it's this big, flashy white card that you are going to get blown out by. And like you can't afford to play around it, and so you kind of just have to like hope they don't have it, and they're gonna always have it, and like flash it in. I think that that -2 exile target tapped creature gain 2 life is so good. Like, and then the fact that you're guaranteed to keep the planeswalker around.
Yeah.
Since they've already declared, well, not guaranteed in air quotes, they could do something else to it, but like guaranteed in the sense that like they've already declared attacks if that's happened, and you can like snag their biggest thing and it's gone forever.
Like, yes.
In my Magic 2022 bingo card, I did not have combat trick planeswalker.
Right.
Which is essentially what this is.
Right.
The lore behind this, I don't know how much people are Vorthos fans, but like the lore behind this has been so kept under lock and key for a while, and people were speculating. And the fact that it ended up being the Emperor of Kamigawa and had this cool backstory was just beyond incredible. Not to mention stapled onto a powerful effect, because we've talked about cards that are thematically cool and mechanically boring, and this ticks both those boxes for me. The Wandering Emperor is fantastic.
Yeah, I love this return. Like we find out, I'm a little disappointed we don't have a name.
So they actually explain in the lore that
they?
on Kamigawa, you're not allowed to know the emperor's name.
Okay.
They are just the emperor. Yeah. And so that's why the Wanderer doesn't have a name. And so it is a little cheesy, but it's a cool explanation still, and I'm all on board.
I'm very pro it, and I'm excited to see more of this planeswalker. Like I'm happy we finally get to see a second iteration since War of the Spark, right?
Yeah, and this is the first like real iteration.
Yes, that's true. What we saw the Wander from War of the Spark, right? Yeah, and that was like our first entrance. We're like, what? And now we get this, and also the border on this card.
Yeah, fantastic,
so good, and yeah, I'm a little obsessed with this planeswalker now. I was obsessed with the Wanderer too. It wasn't a great card like the War of the Spark one, but man, it wasn't bad.
Yeah. So Chris, you asked for a red card as my next one. So we're not Mardu, but we do have a red legendary creature with Hinata Dawn Crowned for 1 blue, red, white legendary creature, Kirin Spirit, with flying and trample. Spells you cast cost 1 less to cast for each target. Spells your opponents cast cost 1 more for each target. So there is like the internet went, of course, straight to the most degenerate place, which is Curse of the Swine, exile all of your opponent's creatures. They all become pigs, which I'm crazy hyped for. But if I was going to build a commander from this set, it would be Hinata. And that's because it does something that I really like, which is it makes you want to play very specific cards. And this is kind of similar to what I talked about with March of Reckless Joy, that this is an X spell commander, but doesn't care necessarily about making X big just to make it big. It make it big because it targets things.
Right.
And I think that that's really fun. I think that there's a lot you can do, and that's a very fun niche to play in. Like there is the what is it? Mycosynth lattice to turn everything into an artifact, and then Biforce to destroy every artifact you don't control. So like there are definitely like the more like spiteful ends of that, but like there's just a lot of fun cards that target things, like let alone your own things, like kind of like a feather deck where like your benefit is that you're targeting stuff and now you can just target more of your own stuff too.
Yeah, this is cool. And having the like you could have the first effect full stop and it would still be a very cool card. And then they staple on spells your opponent's cast cost one more for each target. I love that so much. Just like accidentally hosing people down and you're gonna catch people who miscount their mana and go like, oh crap, I forgot this targets two things. Like, there we go. I just wasted my turn. Yeah, I love this. Hanada's really cool. This effect feels very Jeskai.
Yeah,
well.
I'm also I'm a fan of unique feeling cards in the color that still feel that color.
Yeah.
And this is one of those commanders that it feels like this should have been done already. But since it hasn't, it's so cool.
Also,
like it fits in so well. Cool. Also Kirans are just awesome.
Speaking of cool mythical creatures, Kappa Tech Wrecker. This is Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle dot card. It is 1 in a green for creature turtle ninja. It has ninjutsu for 1 in a green. When Kappa Tech Wrecker enters the battlefield, you put a death. Sorry about that. You put a death touch counter on it, and whenever it deals combat damage to a player, you may remove a death touch counter from it. When you do, exile target artifact or enchantment that player controls. So we got Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle with naturalized stapled onto it and ninjutsu. It is phenomenal. Is it the strongest card in the world? No, but I don't care. I'm getting 4 of these and I'm altering them to be the Ninja Turtles and nobody can tell me otherwise.
I'm surprised. I'm sure there's going to be a secret lair. Let's face it.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think there will be. And if it's not like actual Ninja Turtles, like it's gonna be like very tongue in cheek.
Yeah.
So
like,
which Ninja Turtle is this? Well, I know, like I don't know. They can straight up probably immediately do Ninja Turtles because Ninja Turtles is Hasbro.
Yeah.
It is.
Isn't it?
I'm
pretty sure Ninja Turtles is Hasbro.
The comic is owned by I think Image. But I don't know who owns the actual rights to it. I think you're right. I think it is Hasbro.
And we all know Hasbro.
It might be one of those things where it just comes down to which version of the Turtles could it
be.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, obviously we haven't talked about it. There's also Splinter in this. And the fact that like they put Splinter and a Ninja Turtle in this set is so beyond good. And Splinter pumps ninjas. It is so good.
Now, which Ninja Turtle do you think Kappa Tech Wrecker is specifically? Is the question.
Oh my gosh! So
he's got the both swords, so I mean,
right?
Automatically, I feel like brain goes to Leonardo, right? But
if it's just one, then it has to be Michelangelo because he's the last Ronin. He's the last surviving turtle, and he uses all the weapons. But if it's all 4, yeah, you're right. Yeah, I love this. The art, the mechanic, it's 100% me. And it goes in my mythical Sultai Ninjas deck that I'll never buy because it's...
Also, this is one of the few cards that like I wanted to use this specific art because the alt art on this is like, wait, that's a turtle?
It's very cool art.
It's great art, like but it's like, you need to emphasize this is a turtle. Like, I need to know this is a turtle. You can't even see the outline of the shell from the back.
And I really like this card with, we kind of talked about this death touch counter, removing it type effects, but I really like this with ninjutsu, where like once you remove the counter, they're less likely to block it, which then makes it more likely that you can ninjutsu a different ninja to replace this one with, which then puts it back in your hand. And like, there's just a lot of good shenanigans there. Or you make them block this because they don't want you to bounce it. And like, there's just a lot like of mind games there that I think is really fun. And it's one of the reasons I think ninjutsu is a very cool mechanic. because you're going to have to
for sure.
manage letting your opponent get their counter back.
Yeah, it does really make, like, people say math is for blockers. When you're playing an Ninjutsu deck, there's so much like hypothetical math that goes beyond this. Like, man, what card could they have in their hand that they're going to sneak into play?
It's very similar to Morph.
Yeah.
Or from Morph, it's like, well, what are the options? And
yeah,
there's a lot that can be going on.
I hate Morph. Mostly because I never have the mana to actually morph things.
I get that.
My next card is an uncommon as well. But back to the artifacts. I did pick the artifact creature construct Tawashi Guidepost. It is a 4-cost creature for 2/1. It's okay, that's very meh. But when it enters the battlefield, put a 1/1 counter on target creature you control. It also has the ability of 4 and tap it, draw a card. This ability costs 1 less to cast, activate for each modified creature you control. So back to that modification. You could potentially have a free tap and draw card creature on the field. Or a very cheap, I mean, like 2 costs to draw a card every turn is also pretty reasonable, especially depending on your colors. This is a great card that can just see a lot of, just fixing in certain decks if you need additional body, additional card draw. It also modifies, so you do get a lot for your 4 mana, which is what I really like. It's just getting it out in the field. You are modifying your creature, so it's minimum of 3 cost to draw a card, or maximum potentially. Never mind if you have anything else, but it's nice. I like this card for an uncommon. I think this can see a lot of just, I need extra things in my red deck or white.
So, my next card is probably one of the cards that I'm most excited to slam in a deck. And it's actually go toe and toe with Tawashi Guidebot, and that's Kadama of the West Tree. And so one of the jokes that I made when we did our Crimson Vow spoiler cast or top 10 was that Crimson Vow was a better Hamza set than it was Edgar set. And that's kind of where I'm at with this, of like, we have all of these cyberpunk ninjas, all of this stuff, but what am I excited about? The tree that's here.
Yeah.
So Kadama of the West Tree is 2 and a green for a legendary creature spirit with reach, because all Kadamas must have reach.
Absolutely.
And then modified creatures you control have trample. And then whenever a modified creature you control deals combat damage to a player, search your library for a basic land card, put it onto the battlefield tapped, then shuffled. So for Great Commander Showdown, I started playing Hamza. It was on my list of the Commander Legends. I wanted to build a deck. It's also super budget, which is a great way to get into Commander. And Kadama is really a great powerhouse for that deck and fills a spot that it's been missing. And so it's already playing cards that are creatures with counters get trample or whatever.
Right.
So this is another one of that effect. But then one of the places the deck does actually struggle is with color mana requirements for things. And so, like, since you can't reduce that cost, and since you do still want to play, like, there kind of is an enchantment sub-theme in the deck, just because there's so many enchantments that give counters, you can really struggle with your mana in that regard. And so I love that this rewards that kind of go wide modified deck that Hamza already wants to be. And then on top of the fact, we get cards like Tawashi Guidebot, where there's 3 total colorless or all generic cost artifacts that have to do with modified.
Yeah.
And it's already like all of those are a style of effects that you want in that deck. And so there's kind of this really cool suite of modified that's going to be able to be brought into Hamza for like little to no mana cost in most games. And I'm super excited about how all of these cards are going to mesh together.
obviously this is what is this, the fifth Kodama they've printed.
Mhm.
They've done north, south, east, west, and central. Um, they've all been hits. Like every time you see Kodama of the blank tree printed on anything, you know you're in for a ride because they
Mhm.
always are just massive successes. I have a deck that I've been running that has Kodama in it as the partner, and it is a house. And this card is just that as well because like there's so many accidental +1/+1 counters in everything. Obviously, like hardened scales and decks like that, Hamza, but even like decks that care about equipment matters, decks that care
Mhm.
about Enchantress. Like green is the perfect color for this. You could just go wild. Like arguably, if you had a go wide strategy and were able to throw a bunch of counters on it with Hamza or whatever, you go and swing out. You've drawn all of your basic lands out of your deck,
Right.
and then with land destruction being so frowned upon, like you just win. I mean, I don't know how you don't win after that.
Yeah.
Fuck wild. All right, my final card is also a green card. Um, it is a common. It is a lowly, sad little common, but you know what? It's
Look at you
powerful.
being a casual.
Yep. I
It's a
am
very good
a.
common.
It's a very good common.
Admittedly, it is a very good comment.
I played a lot of Kaladesh Standard and Kaladesh Draft, and one of my favorite cards in that was Blossoming Defense. It was a very strong effect for what it did. It gave hexproof, and then I believe it was +1 counter, plus
Mhm.
2 +1/+1 counters. Tamiyo's safekeeping is strictly better than that. So I'll read it for you. It is uh, just a single green for an instant, and it says target permanent you control gains hexproof and indestructible until end of turn. You gain 2 life. If you have a creature that has to survive at all costs, so I'm talking like my Palladium Moors that has way too many auras on it, and I haven't been able to attack with it yet, and somebody comes along and tries to remove it with spot removal, having indestructible and hexproof is nice. The gain 2 life is going to matter in standard and draft, but really those first 2 abilities, you could cut it off there, and that's a playable card for me. The idea that you can save 1 green mana open and save your best thing is insane. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't say target creature, it says target permanent you control. This is so buck wild that they printed this card at common. Yeah, I'm going to sweep up every single one of these copies that I can.
Yeah, I love that. Whereas Blossoming Defense gave you the counter, so it was better at winning combat.
Yeah.
In that sense, like this one just giving indestructible just kind of makes it not matter. Where it's like, okay, well, I'm going to survive anyway. Versus like hoping that you were one ahead. Like where Blossoming Defense really benefited was like almost like the 2-for-1 of I can blank your removal spell and now get in for 1 more damage than you were anticipating. My clock is now faster.
Defense does not give counters; it just gets +2/+2.
Oh, it just gets +2/+2.
Oh, that's right.
And so yeah, so like it's just like that. That's really where you want it to be. And so like Blossoming Defense is pretty bad if you can only get one of those 2 modes. And so like this is kind of on the other side then of like, well, you're gonna survive no matter what it is. And I love that you called out that it's target permanent. So whatever you're doing to destroy my stuff, it is protected.
Yeah. If this was even a mana more, probably wouldn't be on my list. But the fact that it's just a green, and I play in standard when I'm feeling a little wild and I'm tired of making people cry. I do play green Stompy. And it sucks so bad when you put in all the work to ramp up and you get your big thing out there and the control player, which is me,
which is also me.
Yeah. So having something like this to protect whatever your biggest creature is just so nice. Yeah.
Also, the flavor text says to keep the reality chip out of Jin-Gitaxi's hands, the Wanderer entrusted it to Tamiyo.
Oh no!
Nothing to see here, anyone. We will not
this can't go wrong.
Yeah, we'll not be returning to this at all. So, Chris, before I start crying, what is your next card?
My final card is something.
March of the Swirling Mist.
March. It is a March. Where is it though? March of the Swirling Mist. It's X and a red and a blue For an instant speed, as an additional cost to cast a spell, you may exile any number of blue cards from your hand. The spell costs 2 less to cast for each card exiled, and then up to X target creatures phase out. Again, very nice protection. Protect yourself from that board wipe, from that return creatures to hand BS. Return, it's nice to see blue getting some protection like this. Blue has always managed to target things and put things back and do things, but I feel like it's always had a bit more of a problem protecting itself. So I really liked this as part of the March series, that it is getting an instant speed protection. Kind of at least your creatures, protect yourself from that board wipe. Granted, you don't phase out, so I mean, something to keep in mind. But you could
correct me if I'm wrong. Is this the first time we've seen phasing in the blue color pie? Normally, that's a white thing, right?
Phasing has been primary. At least all the good phasing stuff has been white.
Yeah, at least recently.
I mean, other than like Norin the Wary or whatever. Or does he bounce? I don't know.
No, he just bounces.
But yeah, this is like, you hit the nail right on the head, Chris. This is a powerful effect. And the fact that you can do what Cameron's been saying about, like, just pitch some cards, and you don't need a big X. You just need the right X for the amount of things that you have on the board. Yeah, this is a cool protection spell for sure.
Yeah, and just it's nice to have the ability that exile, like, again, being able to, you have one blue up, but I can potentially protect at least, 2, maybe, however many creatures I need to, based on what's in my hand.
And unlike other colors, like blue has no problem
Having
drawing
a full
excess
hand.
cards that you would need. Right. Like, sometimes you're sitting in a game with 11 cards in your hand, and if you don't have something out that, keeps your hand size large, you're like, I'm not using these other 4 cards anyways. Might as well pitch them and, survive this board wipe. Yeah, cool pick.
Survive the board wipe. Next turn, you're in. Well, also instant speed. So, like, odds are, like, comes back to your turn. Everything phases back in. You have attackers up and ready, moving and grooving.
And I think one of the powerful parts about this is that you can phase out your opponent's creatures. So one of my favorite decks is Mono Blue Tempo. Because Curious Obsession is one of my favorite cards. Nice. And so I'm a big fan of the, like, I'm going to phase out all of your stuff and then just attack you for lethal. Like, your 3 or 4 blockers, they're all gone on your end step.
That's
like,
also a very nice thing. I wasn't even, like, like, I wasn't even thinking about that. I was mostly just thinking, like, it for the protection.
Right. Like, and because that's where I live my life, is the Mono Blue Tempo Merfolk side of blue. And so where the counter spells are like supporting your plan versus, well, I say that I'm playing just like control and historic, but but like, I like to live on that side. And so just the fact that this can be used offensively on top of all the great defensive applications that y'all have talked about, I think is so cool.
I'm assuming your method is actually what this card was designed for.
Yeah.
Because that is a very blue thing. Like, you have sleep and things like that are just like, I need to do something. I'm not destroying. It's like, I'm returning. I'm tapping everything. That's very blue. I need to find a way to get in. And that makes sense for what this card was probably intended for, but also just very nice protection.
The one caveat I say to this, because this is like how I play Magic, how bad would this feel if this gets countered? Like, you've exiled those cards and you've spent a card, and then they just like, no.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of the vibe for this whole cycle.
Yeah.
Is like
high risk, high reward.
Yeah, it's you want to make sure you're clear for takeoff. Like,
marching. You're marching.
Yeah. But that's going to bring us to our final card of the set. So this is what we are referencing on Jarret's card, as well as the final mechanic for this set. And that is Tamiyo Completed Sage. Which is a 5-mana planeswalker for 2 green blue and a hybrid Phyrexian green blue mana, which means you can pay with 2 life. And that's Tamiyo is a legendary planeswalker. Tamiyo comes in with 5 loyalty, has the passive ability of Completed, which is that the blue or green can be paid with blue, green, or 2 life. And if life is paid, this planeswalker enters the battlefield with 2 fewer loyalty counters. So it can be a 5 mana, 5 loyalty walker, or 4 mana, 3 loyalty walker. From a story perspective, Tamiyo gets got. So in Jin Kataxis' quest to perfect machine kind, he's able to use the reality chip to corrupt a planeswalker. Tamiyo gets got. And the fact that they keyworded completed, I think does not bode well for a lot of other planeswalkers. Because I think other people, rest in peace, Koth.
Yeah.
Like, you've been fighting Phyrexia for like 10 years. I don't think the odds are in your favor anymore.
R.I.P. my guy.
Kind of transitioning to like a new big bad almost.
Yeah.
I love that.
And like, it's one of the cool things about Magic from a story perspective, or at least for me, is when we can tie in the planeswalkers with these bigger threats.
Yeah.
It's not just like, oh, I'm going to show up on this plane and help with the problem. But it's showing up and building to something new. That's part of why I think Kaldheim was so cool. We had Kaya show up and fight Vorinclex, one of the other Phyrexian Praetors. And this one, we have all these big bads showing up, and then it's actually Jin Kataxis. And then there's actual stakes. Like, I've never heard people talk about Magic story as much as being upset that Tamiyo got completed.
People were mad.
And so, but we haven't even really talked about what Tamiyo does. So I guess we should do that. So +1, tap up to 1 target artifact or creature. It doesn't untap during its controller's next untap step. Pretty typical Tamiyo there. -X, exile target non-land permanent with mana cost X from your graveyard. Create a token that's a copy of that card. And then -7, for probably the weakest ultimate on a planeswalker in a long time. Create Tamiyo's Notebook, a legendary colorless artifact token with spells you cast cost 2 less to cast and tap draw a card. And so in a lot of ways, pretty typical Tamiyo. One of the complaints that I had is, other than the Phyrexian mana and the mana cost, this kind of just feels like regular Tamiyo.
Yeah.
But I really like these effects. Even in, granted, I'm the Atraxa Super Friends player. And so Tamiyo is honestly, there are 2 of the iterations of Tamiyo are some of my favorite cards for that deck. Don't sleep on that +1 to tap your opponent's thing and it doesn't untap. Like, this is just artifact or creature, but like, and again, don't underestimate the politics of that. You should not just be tapping something with this ability. This is something where like, hey, I can tap the big threat, but you can't do something to me.
Yeah.
And then the fact that her -X makes tokens is, pretty cool. Obviously not great if you're reanimating something legendary, but like the fact that you can have like a doubling season or parallel lives and get 2 of whatever it is that you're animating is
just what Simic
cool.
needs.
Right.
Yeah.
And then, finally that ultimate, again, pretty weak because the Notebook can be destroyed.
It's expensive. It is an artifact that can be destroyed. It's
right.
Yeah, it's kind of meh, but
you should get
I
some
like
good.
The first 2 abilities. The last one, you have to have a lot of things go right for that to stick around.
Right.
So as far as, and like, how often do you ultimate anyways? I think this is one of those that you said where you use the tap effect politically. Obviously in 1v1 you just use it to tap down whatever's the biggest threat against you, and then the fact that you can reanimate, and if you have proliferation or anything, any way to copy the token that comes out, those are really strong. Any sort of like exile from graveyard matter stuff, like there's a lot that you can do with this. I think it's cool. I think it's value-y. It's not my cup of tea, but I am also the bad guy, and so I got so hyped when I saw that she was completed.
Yeah.
Cool.
So I'll say the play that I can't wait for, and this can't happen in Commander, but is I cannot wait to use a Tamiyo to reanimate a Tamiyo.
Yeah.
Is it going to be good? No, but I cannot wait to do it.
one thing we should notice is that like that artifact is strong, and so like the opportunity that it can be a big ult if ulted based on timing. Like
Yeah.
that ult can let you empty your hand for
It's the type of ultimate that it has to be good right then.
Yeah.
And I think and the reason I say I think it's one of the worst ones is if someone has instant speed artifact removal, you cast one spell at reduced cost and then it gets blown up.
Unless you cast an instant in response to it being targeted.
This is true. Like there are things you can do.
There are things you are going to do, but yes, like it's. But I think if you are hovering in that, like I think ultimately, this is a great card for Atraxa.
Oh yeah, 100. Yeah, it is a great card.
Because if there is that turn, it's like I have everything. I just want to dump all. Like I have a hand grip full of Planeswalkers. Let's go ahead and reduce them all by 2. Hopefully, get them out.
Mm-hmm.
Get them pumped, pass or proliferate, etc. Whatever you need to. But I think that -7 is just more of a situational ult, whereas most of her ability is definitely the recursion and control.
Mm-hmm. So that brings us to the end of our Kamigawa Neon Dynasty's top 7. Jarret, thank you for joining us. Where can the listeners find you?
Yeah, see, I don't like to be found, so I'm gonna no. You can find me wherever you find the Infinity Bros. Obviously, we're primarily a podcast, so you can find us on Spotify, iTunes, wherever you get your podcasts from. If you get the itch to Twitch, check us out. We're _Infinity_Bros. We're on Twitch, Twitter, TikTok. We have our own webpage. Just go to theinfinitybros.com and you can find all the links there for us.
We'll get those thrown in the show notes, listeners, so you can find them there as well. Again, Jarret, thank you so much.
Absolutely. Glad I could be here.
Some announcements on our end. Should be some streams this week, I assume. Forgot to check in with everybody else. But I'm going to assume there will be at least somebody streaming this week. And then we have picked a date for our February book club, and we are going to be doing Binti and Binti Home on February 17th. We did have to skip January, and so we're pushing this back, but adding the next part in the Binti trilogy to that book club. And then next week, we will be back with our top 3 non-electronic hobbies. And until then, you can find us on our social media as OneGeek411. You can join our Discord server, shoot us an email at 1stgeek411@gmail.com, watch live on Twitch, and check out the videos over on YouTube, and then find us wherever it is that you get podcasts. And then if you'd like to find Chris and I, you can do that at our personal social medias. Mine is Humar Whittle.
And I'm not so foreign.
And it's been a great week.
Wash them hands.